We've had almost 2 years of social distancing and shutting down the vital components of what is at the heart of community, such as parks, trails, cafes, community centers, events, and social gatherings. As we look together as a nation to recover from the effects of the pandemic, we find ourselves at a unique crossroad in time. We are now faced with finding solutions to reconnecting our communities again. We recently brought together almost 500 people from across Canada to our online RECONNECT Making Communities Essential event. Over 2.5 days, we had a series of keynote presentations and masterclasses to discuss how we're going to rebuild social connection after the COVID pandemic. Thank you for joining me, Heather Keem from the Tamarack Institute, for one of the 6 discussions that we've had about RECONNECT, making our communities essential. In this discussion, you will hear from a panel of local leaders. Mayor Lisa Helps from the City of Victoria, Mayor Lori Ackerman from the City of Fort St. John, and Deputy Mayor Oonagh Proudfoot from the town of Wolfville. This discussion was moderated by Carole Saab, Executive Director for the Federation of the Canadian Municipalities. These leaders share their story of innovations and high-impact outcomes in building community locally. This discussion outlines the role of local governments and the importance of champions in fostering stronger communities. As a bonus, we have also shared comments and inspiration from participants to deepen the conversation.
Before we kick off our panel, in 2017, the Tamarack Institute hosted a summit of community leaders, elected officials, sector leaders, experts in asset-based community development, all together convened in a learning community to really grow our toolbox and leverage collective efforts for deepening community. And out of that meeting, Tamarack formed its campaign, Cities Deepening Community, which really is a movement to strengthen neighborhood and end social isolation through resident-led action. And over the past 5 years, Tamarack and its network have learned that when communities come together to increase resident power and resilience, there are some major impacts, and they've listed 7. And so I'll go through with them as sort of the real baseline of our conversation today. An increased sense of belonging, improved equity and inclusion, a deepened sense of citizenship, strengthened resilience, enhanced community safety, improved community wellness, and empowered local economies. In the next 5 years, Tamarack will continue to grow this movement and look to elected leaders to engage and enhance the policy ecosystem to make the work of building community easier and more effective. And that's where this panel comes in today. We're just so happy to have 3 incredible local leaders with us today to discuss the ways that elected leaders can work with their communities to strengthen this work and the positive impacts that it can have for individuals and their communities. Joining us today, we have Mayor Lisa Helps from the City of Victoria, BC. She's also the caucus co-chair of the BC Urban Mayors Caucus. Mayor Lori Ackerman for the City of Fort St. John, and Deputy Mayor Oonagh Proudfoot from the town of Wolfville in Newfoundland.
Participant reflection. So thrilled to see mayors talking about the need to strengthen communities. Really excited to see new innovations arising to deepen community.
Deputy Mayor Proudfoot, I'm going to start with you. Really, the town of Wolfville has been building connections through many community projects, such as the Front Street Community Oven, with an emphasis on local economy.
Unlike my counterparts from the West Coast, not only am I on the East Coast, but I'm also representing a very small town. A small municipality, the town of Wolfville, where we have about 4,200 residents. We're about 6.5 square kilometers, and we are home to a university. So Acadia University is in the town of Wolfville. And Acadia sees between 3,600, 3,800 students a year. So we almost double our population when the university is in session. Typically fall through to the winter. Now that doesn't mean that spring and summer they all exit and leave us. In fact, we're privileged and very fortunate to have a lot of students remain with us during the spring and summer months and remain with us after their graduation. Often not directly in the town of Wolfville, but they'll often stay in Nova Scotia. So full disclosure, Deputy Mayor of the town of Wolfville, yes, but I'm also a 23-year employee of the university. So I'm currently the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs. And the reason I bring that up is because in our community, we have a town and gown relationship, and it really, really contributes to the fabric of our community and what we're trying to do here. So the theme that will probably come out in my remarks is that we're small but mighty. And we do a lot in our small town, and we don't just stay within the parameters of our small town either. We work very closely with our neighboring municipalities, the County of Kings and some of the other towns that are nearby. But we see a very different trend and a very different feel in Wolfville because of the institution, because of Acadia. In October of 2018, the town of Wolfville, the university, and the student union, so 3 parties signed a memorandum of agreement. And it was the first of its kind amongst those 3 partners. And it spoke to our role, so each of those 3 entities' role in existing together in this small town that we have.
Participant reflection. I used to live in Antigonish, and I loved going to Wolfville for Deep Roots Music Festival.
In Wolfville, we have a real passion. We have a real warmth. We have a care for the environment. We're a fair trade town. We're a cheetah slow town since April 2016. And we really pride ourselves on equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility. But we've got a lot of work to do, right? So for the most part, we're really happy with what we're able to do. And we have huge involvement from our community. We have citizens who really care. And I honestly believe that that's because we're so small, and our citizens are really woven in to everything that we're doing. You can't walk down the street and see somebody that you saw and not see somebody you didn't see yesterday. Like, that doesn't happen here, right? So we have people part of the same conversations. We have committee representation or representation from our citizens and our university on committees. And so we're all part of that big conversation, and we're all part of that big solution-based whatever it is we're working toward. So, communication is the theme. So we're small and mighty, and communication is key. We saw a little bit of a rejig when we entered in this COVID world and working from home, but we very quickly pivoted, like everybody else in the country, and began or continued working virtually, which was terrific in a lot of capacities or in a lot of ways. We have a big senior component to our town, and being able to get them on virtual was a bit of a challenge to begin with, but then opened up all kinds of opportunity for people to attend meetings and events that they normally wouldn't be able to attend for because of certain obstacles. We really look out for one another as well, right? So with those variables, this is sort of how we've continued to improve the community connection. We always had a good one to begin with. We have some challenges ahead of us, absolutely, but we're doing a really good job for those reasons.
And then Mayor helps, I noted in a recent post from you that you discussed some of the current challenges facing all of us, and especially communities. And, as it seems at some points that the world is really coming apart at the seams. And you also offered 3 elements from your perspective of what we can do to address these challenges. And you said we could become better systems thinkers, becoming less aggressive with how we work through problems, and then listening. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how those lessons can play out for communities looking to address issues like social isolation, community wellness, and how this might help community leaders specifically and elected officials work together as well.
I've been blogging pretty much weekly throughout the pandemic and maybe a little bit before. And this was the first one that it felt a little bit negative. The title is "The World is Coming Apart at the Seams" and what we can do about it. And the 3 suggestions that Carole highlighted are indeed ones that I made. And they came from actually Margaret Wheatley, a book called Finding Our Way, Leadership Through Challenging Times. And I just want to pick up on the 3rd suggestion. So become systems thinkers, which is, understanding how our communities fit together, how every piece, when you're pulling a thread, affects some other part of the community. And that is one way to weave resilience. The other one is use less aggressive language when we're trying to tackle problems. And I've even just from reading that, learned to think differently. We tackle problems, we wrestle them to the ground. We use really aggressive language when we're talking about problems. And so that's a simple one. But the most difficult one is the third one that I talk about in my post, and it's listening, and not just listening, but deliberately going out of our way to sit down and have a cup of coffee with somebody who we might not like, who we might disagree with, who has a completely different point of view, and just sitting down over coffee and being curious about why they have the thoughts they have. And this is really important. Ask them questions more on their perspective without offering a response, without arguing back, without saying, no, but here's what I think.
Participant reflection. Love the offering of finding an opposed thinker to listen and with the intent to understand. We need to bring each other closer together.
And this might sound so simple. And of course, I will get into the conversation later on some of the activities that Victoria is working on and all that. But I think there's a real desire for that human to human connection and to get out of the world of social media where everyone is always disagreeing with everyone. And if we have those difficult conversations, and I've been challenging myself to do it, I've asked my staff, book me one difficult coffee every week with somebody who is vehemently opposed to something the city is doing. And we go for coffee, and it's not awful. In fact, it often ends up being great. So that's what the three pieces that I would highlight in terms of that stitching together, that reweaving and that reconnecting, because we have fallen apart at the seams a little bit as communities and countries and even as a globe. And so those are some small things that we can do at the same time as, as municipal leaders, we can create programs and grants and all that stuff.
Mayor Ackerman, I'm going to turn to you and I'll give a bit of context here as well. Since 2018, the city of Fort St. John has been really focusing their efforts on neighborhood development. You had a community research project in 2018, official community plan as well. And currently the city is a member of Deepening Community Membership and working, focusing on building neighborhood connections, helping people get to know their neighbors and neighborhood. And the city did an extensive community engagement process to make sure that the community was involved and supported this work. You had World Cafe, graffiti walls, visioning sessions. It sounds really neat. Why was it important from your perspective to engage the community at that level in your decision making? And have you seen any other impacts in the community as a result of it?
I have never had to change a flat tire that I didn't want to, because they understand the environment that we live in, and there's always someone there to give a helping hand. And I'm a firm believer that it's community that builds community. We happen to be elected to represent this community, and we are not all knowing in all aspects of community building. So it's important to engage our residents in creating the official community plan. So I know they support it because they created it. My job is simply to make it a bylaw. And so it is, I just see that as engagement with the community as being foundational to democracy and ensuring that their voices are heard. We have found it to be really helpful, especially when you've got a project that is going to take decades to come together, because first of all, you have to decide what you're doing, where you're doing it, why you need to do it, can you do it financially, all that kind of stuff. And so as we're starting our program to activate our downtown into a really active downtown neighborhood, there are people who have moved into town that maybe missed part of the conversation along the way. And when they get onto anti-social media, they're having those conversations around, why are we doing this? We don't need to do this. And others are coming in going, no, we've been a part of this all the way along. And we've had these conversations. And 100th and 100th are no longer the highways, and they need to slow down. And we need to create a pedestrian-friendly safe environment in a winter city that sees less than 7 hours of daylight in 7 weeks from now. And so as we build a community that is safe, using the social and economic development framework that you mentioned, it's a project that the University of Northern British Columbia's Community Development Institute did with us. As we implement all of these things, there's actually a principled plan in place, and it starts to connect, and people can start to see the vision of their community. And we build it for our children's children, not us.
Any of you want to share a little bit more specifically about what has happened in your community that has advanced or encouraged community connection and really helped counter social isolation?
I always refer to our staff as rock stars. In the last census, we're waiting for the census population. We grew from 2011 to 2016 by 8.3%. We broke the national and provincial growth rate. And if it wasn't for the staff that we had, we would not have been able to excel in a responsible and sustainable way. And they come forward with innovative ideas, and we welcome that. And we never push aside ideas. It's amazing what you will get from your staff if you give them that opportunity to come forward without any kind of detrimental comments and pushing them away, saying, no, that's not what municipalities are about. We're building community. And from a municipal perspective, when you look at the political environment that we live in globally, we don't have the luxury of seeing things from a single perspective. So you have to open your eyes.
Participant reflection. We don't have the luxury of seeing things from a single perspective. This is great. Important to cede that privilege of driving and only paying attention to a single narrative.
It's the people, and it's the people who, staff and our community members. Very small town, as I pointed out, and our businesses, like businesses all across the country and the world, were struggling during some of the really lockdown times during the pandemic. And so we as a community thought, okay, what can we do? What can we do to help increase traffic safely to these businesses so that they're not going to close their doors permanently? A lot of them had to close their doors temporarily, go figure. So at one point it was decided, and we thought it was a good idea, to switch our two-way traffic on Main Street to one-way. For any number of reasons. We were trying to create more space, was the primary reason, right? So that we, if we got out and about, we were 6 feet apart, and we were being respectful of that. And we thought it was a good idea, and it was going to be a trial. Well, we didn't even get through the trial period that we identified to try it, because we had so many community members, excuse me, and businesses primarily come to us and say, you're killing us. This is not working. We know you thought it was a good idea, but it's not working. And so council met again and said, okay, never mind. Let's end it. Let's go back to the two-way system, because we got to listen. And many of our businesses are owned by people who don't live in the town, right? So we had citizens saying, this is a great idea. We love it. There's lots of space. We're feeling comfortable. We're feeling safe. And then the businesses are going, no, it's not. And so we said, okay. And we changed our minds. And it's okay. It's okay to change your mind and go back on something and say it didn't work. But it's just another indication, again, of communication and people being involved.
I think it's an important question about what are the assets in our communities, and how can we as governments draw on those and nurture those. And one of the things that we have started to do more of is, and this is going to sound a bit silly, but I'll get into the details, is give out more grants. About in 2016, we started My Great Neighborhood grants. And there's placemaking grants and events grants. And that just requires a group of neighbors to come together and find a nonprofit or their neighborhood association to support them to do anything, build a book box, paint a mural, and any of those kinds of things. And then during COVID, we really just started dumping a lot of money into the community. And what's really remarkable about putting small amounts of money out into the community is to see how people use that, how they come together. how they break those patterns of isolation, and also how it makes the city better. Like I'll bike around and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's from a grant. Oh, look at that little pop-up garden, or look at that lending hub, or, one of the best examples. And if they're, if other people from other cities, this is a good idea that I'd love to share. And it came from our North Park Neighborhood Association. They got a strategic plan grant, and we've been building lots of bike networks and kind of closed off roads, and in some cases to cars. And so they built a lending hub. It looks kind of like a glorified garden shed. It's on by one of the tiny home villages for people who are homeless, and they've got some lawn chairs out there, and they've got board games and tools, and it's open every day, and it's there on the street. And anyways, so we just gave a bit of money, and they've leveraged that into a beautiful new community asset. So I think that's been one of the things that we've realized is grant programs are really powerful, and it's just the money goes so far. For every dollar that we give out, it's kind of multiplied by at least 4 times, and often up to 8 times by the in-kind and the other donations.
Participant reflection. Beautiful examples of how small community grants can make our community better for everyone.
Community, one thing that I thought was really great in many of the examples you shared is that it's starting to give us a real sense of what it looks like when governments see community as an essential partner to solving the challenges that we face, whether that's climate change or isolation or poverty or polarization, or coming out of this kind of pandemic and needing to build a recovery. And so maybe I'll open it up for anybody who wants to jump in with any perspectives on any other specific policy shifts or other changes that can be advocated for that really help recognize the essential role of community.
I think that municipalities need to be seen as partners, as true partners in solutions moving forward, whether it's social issues or climate change or infrastructure, whatever the case may be. And I speak of my knowledge in the province of British Columbia. Right now, municipalities are not seen as partners when it comes to any kind of efforts towards climate change. If we are able to build some kind of infrastructure that contributes to the grid with renewable or clean energy, it's BC Hydro has 2 programs, a net metering or a IPP, and will never be big enough for the independent power production. And the net metering only gives benefit to the meter that particular facility is on. And whereas municipalities are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in electrical bills that we really could be adding to. And if there was a return on the investment, we could certainly do that. I think, when I look at the pandemic, I just think of emergency management in general. And this is an ongoing pandemic that's happened at the provincial level, and we are not privy to information that the province and the health authorities have. And so it's very difficult for us to speak in a robust way with our residents. I've started to really push online to get people engaged, and I've seen an uptake in our vaccination rates. We need to get it even higher, and I acknowledge that and recognize that. But I can't answer questions because we're not seen as partners and we're not brought to that table.
Participant reflection. Yes, municipalities should be seen as partners. They are oftentimes thought as adversaries. Partnerships allow a more collaborative approach to overcoming challenges together.
And I'm going to answer the question not so much in terms of policy changes that we need to advocate for, but policy changes that we need to implement as local leaders to create not only the kind of resilience and reconnection that Tamarack has brought us together to talk about, but also, and I know this is a priority for Tamarack as well, to create a true sense of inclusion and belonging for a diversity of members of our community. I think, we were all struck in 2 ways, one by George Floyd last summer, and this summer by the Kamloops Indian Residential School and everything that's unfolded from that. And I think those have been 2 defining moments that have coincided with the pandemic and just can't be understated or and sometimes they both of those seem like really big issues, and what can cities do? But I think cities really do have a role to play. And just to give you a couple of examples, on the heels of the Black Lives Matter reemergence last summer, the city declared International Decade of People of African Descent. So the UN decade goes from 2015 to 2024, and we have adopted that and created a task force. And it's so awesome. It met for the first time, and I am lucky enough to be a council liaison to it, but of people of African descent in our community who are going to work with us for the next 3 years to help make Victoria more inclusive, less racist, and really set the ground for the future. And that will be a big policy change for the city to tackle that head on, but it's absolutely necessary. And then some of the work we've been doing as well with reconciliation, and I think there could be a whole discussion about that, but we're really at the city trying to, and it's so difficult for many of the reasons that Lori pointed out. We have very little power, but to kind of decolonize the way we do business. So we have a city family, which is our reconciliation body. It's not a task force, it's not a committee, it's a family. It's comprised of myself and a few of my councillors, and then appointees from the local nations, as well as urban Indigenous folks. And it really, it's a different approach to local governance, to handing over authority and decision making to the nations, in a sense. And we're looking right now at our 2022 budget, and every year cities get new assessed revenue for new construction, and the city family has decided that they'd like to bring forward a motion allocating some of that new assessed revenue to the nations in perpetuity in an unrestricted way. So that will be a radical shift. We'll see what our taxpayers have to say about that. But anyways, those are just two examples of things that I think local governments can do in a really practical way to tackle some of the most difficult issues facing us as a globe right now.
Thanks, Mayor Helps. And before we wrap, Deputy Mayor Proudfoot, I wonder if you have any sort of closing thoughts that bring these pieces together.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm hearing from both comments so far, and just to reiterate, the role of municipal government, we're at the grassroots, right? So we're the ones who know our communities best. And just to say, it's three-way communication, and it's three-way commitment, and that diversity of thought and diversity of practice is critical in decision-making and policy development. And you know what, for a small town, we aren't particularly diverse yet, and we really wouldn't be without the university. So we at least have that to draw on. But exactly to your point, Mayor Helps, that policy development and those decisions being made by a group of people, and people who are representing diverse thought processes and diversity in general. Three-way communication, three-way commitment.
Participant reflection. The content of this panel is so wonderful, and what's impacting me even more is to see 4 incredible women in positions of power sharing ideas together around supporting our communities. As a woman who struggles to find my way in leadership spaces, this is feeling incredibly important.
Hey, thank you very much. Well, that I think is a really excellent point to conclude on, and it brings us to the end of our time together. And I think one thing we can say for sure from all of this, and something that we're learning out of this pandemic really, is that those communities that were more connected really were more resilient to the shocks of the pandemic. I think that's a baseline truth of the kind of power and strength of community connection. And so too, from that flows, the local governments who are best able to harness that and engage in that way are going to be best positioned, and so forth. The best regions, the regions that are going to do best are those who can figure out how to adequately engage and communicate and convene with their local governments and communities as well. And so lots of lessons here about the importance of connecting and reconnecting, especially now in our context. And so with that, I'll just say a big thank you to all 3 of you for your excellent contributions today. Really a pleasure to talk to you all, and a big thank you to Tamarack for hosting this kind of a conversation and continuing the important community building work.
We believe that deepening community is the answer. Reconnecting our communities so that they are strong and resilient is so vital to addressing any community crisis or problem. Cities Deepening Community supports community changemakers to use asset-based community development with collective impact to build neighborhood strategies. We help cities, community groups, and organizations to build their knowledge and skills to put residents at the center of developing a neighborhood strategy. Join us in the movement to deepen community. Learn more at our website at www.tamarackcommunity.ca/Cities Deepening Community. And don't forget to listen to the other 5 discussions on RECONNECT, making your communities essential.